Well, good morning.
Good morning, Terry.
I'm Terry Delker. I'm with the Friends of the Library, the Fairhope Public Library, and this is February 8th, 2011. And we're very happy to have with us today Mary Butler Bachtell. Marie Butler Bachtell, better known as Jinx, but we'll get to that later, how you got that wonderful nickname that your friends call you. Marie was born in Mechanicville, New York on April 21st, 1921. She served in the Marine Corps from 1943 to 1945 in Hawaii, and she left with the rank of corporal. Is that right?
Yes,
Well, Jinx, would you tell us a little bit about growing up and your family in New York?
Well, I just always knew I was going to be a school teacher, so after I finished high school, I went to State University of New York, SUNY Oneonta. I graduated from it. Pearl Harbor happened my senior year in college. So I did teach school 1 year and then joined the Marine Corps.
Well, you told me you came from you were the eldest of...
Yes, We had 8 children in the family, and I was the oldest. That was one reason I enlisted rather than trying for OCS, because I was always the responsible one. The oldest one was all the kids, the school teacher, and I thought if I join the Marine Corps and I go to OCS, they'll put me in charge of somebody, and I don't want to be in charge of anybody.
Well, your family, how many boys and girls in that family?
There were 5 girls and 3 boys.
And you were the eldest.
And my father was pretty unhappy with me when I decided to join the Marine Corps.
What was their reaction?
Yeah, he was a little upset about it. But the first time I came home with my uniform on, he paraded me all around, showed me off. So.
He was happy at that.
Yeah, he was.
So you were in college when we entered the war.
Yes.
At that point in time in college, did you decide you would like to enlist?
Oh, no. No, I had no thoughts like that. I was going to be a school teacher.
And right after you graduated, then did you teach?
I taught for a year, yes.
And then the decision came that you would enlist?
Well, it was wartime, and I just felt like I needed to do something else. And the papers were full of wax and waves, but they were pretty big outfits, and I always tended to go to the smaller ones. So I thought of Marines and Coast Guard. Coast Guard was spars. And then I thought, well, I'm very prone to seasickness. Suppose they put me on a boat in the Coast Guard. And I always did I always liked the thought of the Marines. So I enlisted with them.
Did you know some Marines?
No, I did not, no.
Well, where did you have to go to enlist?
There was a recruiter in Albany, New York, which was about 15 miles away. So he signed me up, and I just went to my normal doctor for the physicals. And he said, well, they'll never take you, because I've seen Marine women in New York City, and they were quite sturdy, tall women. And I said, well, they always have to have some when they're marching, the tall ones are in front and the little ones are behind. So that worked out okay. I didn't have any problems at all enlisting. I did have to go to New York City. I had stayed overnight in a hotel, went by myself, had to take a taxi to Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I forget what I have to do there, but I had to complete the enlistment in Brooklyn Navy Yard. And then I was all ready to go. Then I took a train to North Carolina. And when we arrived, women ran up and down beside the train yelling, "You'll be sorry, you'll be sorry." And I thought, oh my, what have I done?
Who were those? Just some people?
Just being funny, trying to scare the new recruits.
Well, there were women and men recruits on the train?
No, it was women.
It was the women only? So you're in North Carolina.
Camp Lejeune. That was boot camp, Camp Lejeune.
Well, what was boot camp like for women?
Well, it was well organized. some women were not able to take it and just sort of cut loose immediately. I never had any great problems with it. I was never very athletic or anything, but I really didn't have any great problems with it. The only males we had teaching us were the DIs, the famed Marine Corps DIs. You've heard of them, the drill instructors. And I think they probably picked and chose them carefully because they had to clean up their language quite a bit to deal with the women. But they were very good, and so we learned to do all the fancy Marine marching, and we did all the things. We took guns apart and put them back together. All the exercise things, and
were you doing the push-ups and the running and?
Yeah.
So it's pretty physical.
Well, yeah, it was pretty physical.
And did you train with the weapons as well?
Not really. I remember once shooting at targets. I think that was probably the only time why they even did it. But
were there different opportunities for you from your training of where you would next go?
Yeah. I remember we took aptitude tests, and I had my heart set on doing something with airplanes. Anyway, my mechanical aptitude was not very high.
Oh.
And it was something I dearly wanted to do, and I remember a tear rolled down my face. And they relented, and they sent me to Naval Air Technical Training Center in Norman, Oklahoma. And I had 21 weeks of mechanical work there. What they did, they had 1 week of book work, theory, and 1 week of practical work, doing whatever you were taught from the book. Well, I was a college graduate. The printed word, was great for me. So I always they had some good men mechanics, but I would have the highest marks in the class. Then would come the practical work, and I'd be pretty down there. So they would wonder what on earth to do with these two widely diverse marks. So they tended to shove them together. So I graduated with not too bad a mark from there.
So you're doing hands-on mechanics.
Oh yeah, taking things apart. I remember the one where I knew I wasn't a hot shot mechanic was some kind of brake that had many, many parts, and I put it all together and I had a part left over. So stories like that, my husband always said, "Oh, nobody should fly on military planes if they let Jinx be their mechanic."
Well, during this time, what was the morale like between you young women who were there and those other women? What were they coming from backgrounds similar to yours?
Yeah. They were widely diverse, from business. There were other school teachers. There was a wide diversity of occupations. As far as the Marines were concerned, I guess I was very fortunate that I was in the aviation branch, and they tended to be more modern, forward-thinking. The regular Marine Corps did not like the idea of women coming in, and the old sergeants, thought, well, the Corps is ruined. They are ruined. They've taken women in. But really, the aviation branch, I always felt accepted there.
During this training time, did you feel any hardships or feelings about, have I made the right choice?
No, once I got to boot camp and got involved in things, no, I was okay. I was settled. I was all right with it. And I enjoyed the women I met, and we had very good officers. After I finished the 21 weeks of training, I came back to Cherry Point, North Carolina. And there, I was assigned to engine test cells. They were test, big rooms with these huge, big Pratt and Whitney engines in them. But that was actually, I was the only woman working there. All the rest were men. So that was.
So that had to be a proud point for your family to know that, right?
I don't know whether it was or not, really.
Well,
just one of those strange things you run into.
So after Oklahoma, you were sent to
Cherry Point, North Carolina.
And then from Cherry Point.
From Cherry Point, that's where I volunteered to go to Hawaii. The Marines didn't believe in sending women any place other than Hawaii.
Uh-huh.
Well, you can understand they have a different job demanding than most service people. So anyway, I volunteered, and I was in. They had to send housekeeping troops, and then I was in the first group after that. They went to Hawaii.
And this was 1943.
43, I think. Yeah.
And you were leaving. What month was that? Do you recall?
No, I really don't.
I was wondering how did a young woman from New York feel about going to Hawaii?
Well, I figured I'd never be able to afford it on my school teacher's salary, so I'd better volunteer.
Did it seem glamorous?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
And when you arrived, what did you find?
Well, it was strange when we arrived because, well, for one thing, our barracks were very, very nice. The CBs had built them for us. They're a brand new barracks, so they're the nicest barracks we ever had. And we had a compound for the women. You had a guard post, and so the women all lived in one compound. But you could still tell it was wartime in Honolulu when you could get leave and go into Honolulu. You saw all kinds of strange things. That's a story. I don't think I'll tell that one.
Well, did it seem like a country that was on the defensive? Were they concerned about more attacks when you were there?
I never got that feeling, really. It was just that they were based there, and they were using it as their shipping off point going down to other islands in the Pacific. I never got the feeling that they were expecting any other. Well, no, I'm sure they weren't expecting any other attack.
So there wasn't a feeling of maybe a
No.
threat while you were there for
No.
your welfare?
No, we were supposed to replace the men, and then they could go on down to other assignments. However, the men never left because by that time the war was going well enough. I guess they didn't need them.
So tell us about what you did in aviation in Hawaii.
Well, I was assigned to headquarters squadron and had my own plane. I started out with an SNJ-4, which is a two-seater scout trainer, I guess you'd call it. Nice, neat little plane. I liked it. and my job was, did I show you the list of things I had
right
to check
there,
off
the
every day?
list, yes.
Yeah, every day, or every morning. The first thing you did was start your plane up, and you checked off all this whole row of things, and signed it that your plane was ready to fly. One of the things, for instance, was there was a sump pump underneath the gas tank, and you crawled underneath and you drained that a little bit so water wouldn't be in the gas. Well, my goodness, I never saw any water in the gas. I did that time after time. And then I got a little slack about it because I never saw any water in the gas. And then a plane, not one of our planes, but a plane that flew into our area had to ditch in the Pacific. And the word came back to us that it was because of water in the gas. Well, that straightened me up. From then on, I really checked the gas every morning.
Were you assigned to this first plane, and that
yes,
was your plane,
that
your
was
sole
my plane.
responsibility?
I took it, sole responsibility. When it had more things than you could do just quickly in the morning, you took it across the tarmac. There was a big building to do repairs and bigger service.
Were you able to fly in those planes?
No, that was another funny thing because men, they called them plane captains on this. It really, can't think of the name of it.
The pilots? They were the Marine pilots, correct?
Yeah, but they're called plane captains that take care of the planes. But there is another name, crew chiefs.
Crew chief.
Crew chiefs, yeah. I forget what I was going to tell you.
Well, I wondered if you were able to fly the plane yourself
yeah.
or be flown in the plane.
Oh, yeah. Well, the men crew chiefs were required to fly, and you can see why, because a pilot could more easily trust what's being done if the person doing the work is on the plane, too. We were forbidden to fly.
The women.
Yeah. So the poor pilot had to take for granted that what we told him we had done, we had done. I thought, well, that's not really fair to him, but...
Wow. Did that mean that some of the pilots preferred to have men crew chiefs?
I never saw that. I will say that. I never saw that.
So there was a real trust between the pilot and the crew chief, I suppose.
Yeah, evidently. Also, we had, most of the people had, in that picture, most of the people each had their own plane. But
It's a wonderful picture. And what kind of plane is that?
That was a JRB. That was a 2-engine Beechcraft, carried about 8 passengers, I think. It was the commanding officer's plane. And I eventually went from I love my little SNJ, but I went from that to this and took care of this one.
So were you a crew chief for one of those planes as well?
But we had a man who was, right there on the end, he was called the troubleshooter. And if you ran into something that needed repairing and you were having a problem, you called for the troubleshooter, come help you.
And I see on the back of the picture you've got the list of all the people that you served with, and their states, and so it was people from all over the country.
They were from all over, yeah. Nice. They really were a nice group of people.
What kind of social life did you have while you were there?
Well, it was where I met my husband, so
That's good.
nice social life. We they had activities for you on the base, and you went to movies. Well, one of the funny things that happened when we arrived, the base was the commanding officer had requested that we go places by bus until the servicemen got used to having women on their base.
So you were the first women
Yeah.
to come to this base,
Right.
then?
So anyway, the first night we were there, a group of us decided we wanted to go to the movie. So we got on our bus and went to the movie place, and everybody was seated when we walked in. Well, we walked in, and the place erupted. They shouted, they screamed. We backed up and turned around, got on our bus, and went home.
So the sight of you women was kind of startling at first.
Yeah, it was. So I forget how long we had to do that, but I imagine not more than a couple of weeks. Where we lived normally after that.
So you had events scheduled for you, and
well, you spend a lot. You were in Hawaii. You went to the beach. You had free time. You went to the beach. There's a lot of that. And you'd go into Honolulu, take a day and go into Honolulu and shop and look around. And we got to know the nice couple who were Episcopal priests, I think. And they lived in this beautiful house, and we were invited to go, and quite often we'd go and call on them. They had this wonderful place, fun to go to. And so there were all kinds of things to do.
So were you required, I suppose you had quite a regimen of activities that are up in the morning, and you're taking care of your airplane?
Yeah, you're scheduled. Oh, another thing they did, the women did have nicer, the men always envied us. We had a nicer mess hall, and we could invite guests, and they loved to be invited. They had it was a birthday. If my birthday was in April, they would have a very special thing in April for everybody with birthdays. So they did nice things, yeah.
I think it's a wonderful, remarkable story that you took this great step forward and enlisted. How do you think that changed your life from staying in Mechanicsville and teaching in school?
I was always glad I did it because it was something I'd never again do in my lifetime. I don't know how much help I was to the war effort, but I was glad I did this. We did all kinds of things like planes, visiting planes came in, and you would go out and meet them on the tarmac. And well, that was one of my humiliating. I was pretty feisty back in those days. You know, anything a man could do, I could do. So, however, anyway, I went out to meet this visiting plane. It was loaded with troops coming back from some South Pacific island. And you stand at the edge of the wing, and you keep your eyes on the pilot's eyes. And the pilot always looks right in your eyes. And you run lightly backwards, and he follows you, whatever you tell him to do. He follows you. Well, you can't back a plane up when you park it in the wrong place. Oh. and I didn't get my spacing right, and so we had to. Nobody ever teased me about it, but they had to tow the plane into its parking spot.
Well, that makes me want to ask how you got the nickname Jinx.
Oh, well, it was several little things. I remember when we had graduated from boot camp, you know, we all pressed our uniforms, and we had to learn how to tie a tie to go out on a date. Anyway, I had pressed mine, and there was an empty locker next to mine. So I hung it there because these were little bits of lockers, so it wouldn't get creased. And it turned out that was a no-no. Well, there were several little things like that. And just somebody started saying Jinx, and it just took. And
so it didn't have anything to do with your airplane crew chief?
No, it was little things like that. The other big humiliating thing I can think of, you know, maybe that I can do everything as well as you can, you know. Anyway, a visiting plane came in, and I got it parked, and we also had to gas things up. I went and got the gas truck and drove it over. It was twin engine, and I climb up, you know, with the hose, put the gas in, and I started to climb down to go up and go carry it up to the other one. And a man down below called up to me, throw it over. And why I obeyed him, I don't know, but I did. Of course, I didn't have the strength. This thing was very heavy. I did not have the strength. I threw the thing, and it broke off the antenna of the plane. So I thought, why did I listen to him? I knew I couldn't do that. But the crew didn't mind at all, because that meant they had a couple more days to stay in Honolulu before they had to leave, so they didn't mind.
And I guess that was a choice place to be.
Yeah, but I say it was humiliating to me. Those are the two big humiliating things I can think of that happened.
Well, as the war wound down and came to an end, how did you know the war had ended, and how did you all celebrate that?
I really don't remember that so much.
Did it come as an announcement, or?
I don't think so. I think the word just kind of spread around. And I really don't remember how that was.
Were you planning on continuing
No,
as a Marine?
No, when the war was over, the incentive was gone. I was very, very glad I had done it, because I say I had experiences I never would have had otherwise. But no, it was not for me.
Well, during this time that you were in the Marines, is that when you met your husband-to-be?
Yeah, I had met him. My girlfriend and I had gone into Honolulu shopping and came back rather late. And we thought, well, we'll be too late to eat on the base. So we stopped in a little town in Waipau to have our supper. And then we went out, and it was a drizzly evening, just drizzling rain, and we're waiting for our bus. And a Jeep came along with 2 men in it. In those days, you did this, everybody, they stopped and said, where were we going? They would take us. So we got in. Well, they wanted a telephone number. Well, we gave them a number, which was not a number. It was a working number, but not where they could easily find us. And several days went by, and happened to go out the gate of the guard of our compound, and there they sat outside. They had tried to telephone us, couldn't get us. And so anyway, they wanted to know if we'd go to the beach with them, which we did.
Were these Americans that were there in the Marines?
No, he was a civilian attached to the Army. He was up at Schofield Barracks. So anyway, I was not serious about him when I stayed in Hawaii. We had, just gone out a couple of times.
And what was his name?
Norris David Bachtell, but I called him Bake, B-A-K-E. We became engaged, and I had gotten pretty homesick at that time. I'd been away from home, well over a year, and I was homesick, and I needed to go home, which I did. And then he took leave and came, and we were married in the States and went back.
So you reached the level of corporal while you were in Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
and then the war ended, and you made the decision to be discharged.
Mm-hmm. Well, they would have discharged you when you got to the States anyway. They didn't need you anymore. But I took my discharge in Hawaii. And our commanding officer was a lovely lady, Major Helen Crean, who had the Croix de Guerre from France for World War I. And she had done something with the Red Cross with the Marines in World War I. Charming lady. Anyway, there were 6 of us, I guess, there, in the group that took the discharge.
Yes, here's your picture of discharge with wearing your lace.
Yeah, when we took our discharge, she gave us this lovely little talk about being good to each other, that we were used to being taken care of, more or less, and that we should look after each other. Well, I never saw any of them except this one girl afterwards at all, But she meant well, and you felt so strange because you were used to always wearing this uniform, and here you were in clothes with a choice, and it took a little while to get used to it. It really did.
And you stayed in Hawaii for a while?
Yeah, I got a job just like that. It was, I forget just what they called it. It was something with bills and lading, and I would go to different places and check that things had come in that were ordered. And anyway, it was a nice job because I didn't just sit behind a desk. I got out and around the base.
Was this with the government?
Yes, it was with the Navy.
Well, something else that you brought along, that you said this was your ribbons?
Yeah.
And
well, there's one for American theater, and one for the Pacific Asiatic Theater, and one Victory.
Very nice.
Victory, yeah.
Very nice. So you're in Hawaii for following your discharge, and you're working, and you become engaged there?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then were you married shortly afterwards?
I went on home, and he came home, yeah.
I guess that was a nice homecoming with your family.
Oh, yes, my goodness. And then we went back because he was still working in Hawaii, so we went back to Hawaii. And from there, he was sent to Saipan. And I eventually followed him.
Yes.
For a while, I had to stay in Hawaii.
How long were you in Saipan?
We were, I think, close to 2 years. He was cleaning up the island from, all ordnance. Things were exploding all over the island, and he was helping clean it up.
Well, after this exciting career in the Marines, taking care of airplanes, how did your life change in Saipan?
Well, I didn't think I'd be teaching anymore, but they kept after me in Saipan. They needed a teacher badly, and what it was, the young servicemen had to show that they could pass the equivalent of a 5th grade test. I don't know who they took in, but anyway, I had to teach them and get them through these tests. And one of them turned out to be our butcher at the commissary. And of course, he was just malingering. He wanted to get out. And he was so embarrassed when he saw that I was his teacher. He took the test and passed it right away, so I didn't have to teach him. But anyway, they gave me a Jeep, which helped. And I taught this group of men who ran into some odd things with them. There was one man that, charming man, just read beautifully, did not know how to add, subtract, or divide. If he paid for something, he knew to a penny what kind of change he should get back. Didn't know how he arrived at it. I worked so hard with that man trying to find some way to get through to him. It didn't make sense to him, he couldn't get it. One day it was like, you always see the light bulb going off. It was exactly like that. All at once that light bulb went off in his head, and he knew how. And he went on to higher education after that. I was so proud.
Wonderful. So your connection to the military really continued after your discharge.
Well, in a way, yes, because my husband was connected with them.
And after Saipan?
No, after Saipan, well, then he worked for a part of the government which transferred you around. From Saipan, we came back to Utah in the winter, snow. And from Utah, we went to, where'd we go? That's when we went to Jeffersonville, Indiana, across the river from Louisville. And then we went up to Washington. We lived in Virginia for 15 years before we came here.
Do you have a family?
No, I don't have children.
And your family is still in New York?
My sisters and brothers are up there.
Well, did they serve in the military?
I had one brother who was in the Navy a little, but just wartime also.
And then your connection, do you continue to get benefits, or did you get benefits
No.
Was that something that did not come to women, or?
Well, I wasn't in long enough.
And you continued teaching?
No, I never did go back to teaching.
You traveled with your husband and lived in all these wonderful places.
Yeah, his job required traveling, and I went a lot of places. But yeah, we were in Iran just before the Shah fell.
Really?
Yeah. So we've been some interesting places.
Really? Well, how about flying? How do you feel about flying commercial aircraft?
No, it's okay. As I say, my husband always teased me, you shouldn't fly on them. And I say, well, my plane always came back safely. I don't know if you know, the pilots always fly an ETA, the estimated time of arrival. And they, at that time you would go out and wait for them and direct them back in. And then he would tell you if he'd seen anything wrong or anything that needed checking, whatever. But you always went out and met your pilot and brought him in.
Well, this you come to Fairhope, and you told me earlier you came here for retirement. Is that right?
Yeah, 1975.
With your husband, Bake.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, and you mentioned too that you had not been in touch with any of the people that you had served with. I guess.
No, there was one woman I was in touch with. Yeah.
And do you feel like the women that served have gotten the recognition that they deserve?
I think so. The ones who didn't were the WASP, the ones who ferried the airplanes, because they were never recognized, and they did every bit as good a job as men pilots did. But eventually, like 60 years later, they did recognize them. No, I think we were recognized all we needed to be.
Do you feel like that you, going to Hawaii obviously, but that the adventure you were seeking, you certainly found?
I think so. I guess I was looking for adventure, yeah, it was.
And that culminated in your marriage and continued adventure, it sounds like.
Right.
Well, would you consider that time in your life as, I guess, crucial to everything that came afterwards? But as a young woman at that time, that was very courageous, I would think, to do something like that.
Well, I guess it was a little bit different. Yeah, I didn't know anybody else. Well, I did know one other girl in my college class but she went to OCS, became an officer, so I was just a corporal. It was different, but I used to say it was a worthwhile thing to do. Wonderful experiences, and I met really they were a very good group of people. For instance, I said I was the only girl working in the test cells with a whole group of men, and there was one or possibly two who would get out of line with teasing. The other men would shut them down. They were very, very good, very, very nice. Never had any problems that way.
Well, I think it's a wonderful, very positive, inspiring story of a young woman from Mechanicsville that makes that decision and has such a wonderful experience and for her entire life. And I thank you so much for giving us your time and appreciate it. And it's been delightful. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, Terry. Thank you.
Thank you. You are wonderful.